Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Get in Tune. I'm Michael Gracia, and as always, I have a great show planned. I am excited to talk to my guest. I've got a great one coming on that you'll meet in a few minutes. But before we do that, as usual, let's do the normal promotions. So, number one, the complete 2023 collection of the Whimsical Whiz available on Amazon right now. Just go on Amazon, either type in my name or the Whimsical Whiz, and you will find this book. The complete 2024 collection is coming out probably fall time. I'm still putting it together and adding some strips. Remember that if you follow the Whiz, um, it was more of a big D&D campaign for 2024. So I'm doing strips about the other people in the campaign right now to add to the comic. Um, so yeah, the complete 2023 collection. Also, if you're a Zorro fan, um, there's two I got right here from Bold Venture Press. You can either go to boldventurepress.com or go on to Amazon. And Zorro's exploits and Zorro's swordplay and romance. I got to illustrate two stories in here, one in here. They're all fantastic stories. Mine are monster stories in this one, which I thought was kind of funny. Because I don't really draw monster stories, and the two stories I got for in here were both monsters. Um, and this one was a fun one to draw. The story I drew in here, if you watch the Guy Williams Zorro, there was a 2 or 3 part episode in, I think it was season 2. It continues. My story continued in here. So those are great books. I love reading them. And finally, if you're a fan of newspaper comics, A Kid in a Comic, go to akidinacomic.com, A Kid in a Comic on Facebook, Instagram. They're all over social media. This is a collection of great comic strips, all from indie and pro creators. And if I get to the actual page, there it is. The Wiz is in akidinacomic.com. This is a great way to read a bunch of new strips. This isn't like syndicated strips like Garfield or anything. All original stories by all original indie creators. All right, and now for my guest. I am looking forward to this. He's an amazing cartoonist. I love his work. There's so much I could talk about, but instead of doing that, let's bring him on so I can talk to him. We got Jamar Nicholas. Hello.
Hey, Michael, how are you?
Doing good. How you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk to you
Oh,
tonight.
anytime. I am super excited to chat with you here. So for those who don't know you, can you please? Oh, first of all, let's just say hi to Dylan. Hey, Dylan. Um, can you tell the audience about yourself, like who you are, what you do?
Sure, and hopefully we could talk about this too. I'm getting over some con crud.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I don't mean to keep coughing in your headphones.
It's okay.
So yeah, I'm Jamar Nicholas. I'm a Philadelphia born and raised cartoonist in the space I've been in for the last almost 20 years. Wow. I've been an author illustrator, so I've been doing graphic novels in the traditional book space. I've been in the business since '97, starting out like self-publishing my own work. And kind of a through line with me is that almost everything I've been known for was, you know, things that I came up with, or personal IP,
Yeah.
as the kids say it these days. A lot of our friends are, oh wow, this guy did a run on Daredevil, or this guy drew Flash in 1999, or something like that. Like I've kind of carved out a name for myself doing my own work. So probably the biggest things that people have known me for over the years was in 2002, I did a web comic for Kevin Smith, filmmaker Kevin Smith, called
Mhm.
Detective Boogaloo Hip Hop Cop, which was about a breakdancing detective. Uh, and I did that for it was my property, but I did it on moviepoopshoot.com.
I
That was
remember that.
yeah, that's when Kevin Smith was the biggest
Yeah.
name on our side of the nerd pond. Like he
Yeah.
was like our fearless leader for a minute, and I guess he doesn't really have that same, recognition, but he was a really big deal at the moment. And he's always been a fantastic guy. But Movie Poop Shoot was kind of like a web portal, which was connected to Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. The whole premise of the movie was that Jay and Silent Bob were going to go on the internet and find everybody who talked crap about them and go beat them up.
Yeah.
So Kevin actually made the website. So I was like the Friday comics book, and kind of from there, people started seeing my work in a bigger range, and I've always done a lot of things that I kind of created or had a hand in. And for the last 15 years or so, I've been doing Leon projects, and Leon is a character I created about a kid who uses common sense as a superpower. And I started off self-publishing that. You see, there's a through line there. In 2017, and I parlayed that into a book deal with Scholastic.
That's
So
awesome.
thank you. So since 2020, I've been with Scholastic and doing volumes of the series on Leon and his adventures. So the first book in the Scholastic, and also it's on graphics. So that imprint is the one that carries like all of these heavy hitters in comicdom, like Jeff Smith and Raina Telgemeier and Dave Pilkey and all those guys. So I'm on that imprint.
Oh, listen, you're in good company with them.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I think I did all right for myself. But yeah, the newest book is called Leon Worst Friends Forever, and the book before that is called Leon Extraordinary. So there's a couple of Leon books besides
mhm.
the two that you've seen out in the world. Oh, also,
Okay.
I'm pretty heavily entrenched in the cartoonist. I guess I don't want to call it the community because it's more of a macro idea of cartooning.
Mhm.
I'm on the board of the National Cartoonist Society,
Yes,
and I'm also the chapter chair of Philadelphia. So
that's
there's
great.
a lot going on.
Listen, yeah, it sounds like you're busy, but that's great. I mean, I have a lot of friends in the National Cartoonist Society. Everyone tells me I need to join, and I plan to. I was the reason I haven't at the time was I didn't know what level I fit into.
Mhm,
But yeah, no, I'd like to eventually do it this year and
mhm,
try to get in. It's for me. I mean, I'll tell you a short story. I mean, it's been a dream of mine since I was a little kid to be part of it. And it wasn't like, oh my God, this is where I made it. It's just every cartoonist. Like I grew up on strip comics before I got into book comics,
mhm, mhm.
and the these guys, I don't want to use the term hero or people I idolize, but these were the people who inspired me.
Right.
And it was like, oh, they're part of this organization, and I just always wanted to be like that type of person for another um for a reader, for
Yeah.
whoever's reading my book. Like I grew up, I mean, one of the reasons I drew a lot was I grew up sick. I couldn't play sports. I was in and out
Mhm,
of hospitals, things like
mhm,
that. So for me, drawing was the outlet. And I remember when um I don't even know how old I was. I think I was in late elementary or early middle school. My father contacted the National Cartoonist Society,
wow.
and they sent me all this information. Like um they sent me one of the what do you call it, the books that had all the cartoonists in there.
Yeah.
And that's how I learned about so many. I was like reading about them all the time and seeing what they did. And they sent me a profiles,
Yeah.
that
The magazine. Yeah.
and then they sent me like marketing material. And there was a pan, like I remember it was an orange like four, like accordion four thing, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was big. It wasn't just like, it was like 8.5 by 11 folded, and then you opened it up, and it was just huge. And it had, I remember Marvin was on there, and and I just used to trace them and copy them, and I loved it. And then there was a pamphlet. I think it was by either Chris or Dick Brown, and it just explained how you make comics, like how you write, and it was like advice from them.
Wow.
So I was like, oh my God, this is the most amazing thing ever. So all these people I read about, I was like, I want to be that type of person, because I was so excited every time. And then I was lucky enough to have Richard Yockwell and Tom Gill as instructors in person. And I remember reading about both in that book, and I still have the book somewhere. If I wish I took them out. I remember my profiles is like a green profiles cover, and in there I think is it Kniff? I think it's like a breakdown of like Kniff's strips, and I was like, oh my God,
I would love to see this. I mean, I haven't seen anything like that since I've been in the NCS, but I feel like things like that need to. I'm sure it's archived somewhere, but
yeah, I have to. You know what? I moved a lot of books around, so I know what shelves there are. I just wouldn't know where to pull it.
You know where it is.
Yeah, they're probably not like in the front. Otherwise, I'd be like, here, let's. I would bring it up right now. But yeah, I'll send you photos. It was.
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
That's probably a huge thing for me, and I'm pretty sure your audience is well versed on cartoonist lore. I've been saying lore a lot. That's my favorite new kid word. But yeah, the NCS is the same foundation that got started in the early 40s by these like master cartoonists who were kind of like taking their show on the road, going to the USO and entertaining the troops, drawing giant Kniff heads and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And they made basically a clatch out of that. And this is the same group that has started all the way then. So there's a lot of storied history in the NCS. As a dyed-in-the-wool newspaper guy, I'm right with you. Like, once I found out the NCS was a thing, I was just like, yo, what a dream fulfilled to be, in those ranks. You know what I'm saying? Hey, shout out to D. Rosebuds is such a great strip.
Yeah, I got to get him on his stuff. I love.
And one thing that's really interesting, Michael, is I guess really since I got involved with the NCS, you kind of take it for granted that everybody knows what the NCS is. And I've been a little surprised to find out that so many people have not heard of the NCS. And, I feel like we're students, like I'm a student of the game. We could sit here and talk for 3 hours about newspaper strips. We'll talk about the Yellow Kid. We'll talk about Cats and Jammers kids, like we could do that. And I guess, maybe with generations kind of shifting, it's more of a reach for a new cartoonist to know all of this stuff. But, I think we just kind of took for granted that you did. So, there's been some points where I've had to kind of explain what this is to people. And then, some people said to me, well, that sounds great. Well, why should I join? You know what? If I have to explain it to you, then maybe you don't need to be in it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So, maybe one other thing I'll say about kind of like my positions in the NCS is that I am all about recruitment. I'm all about having the best and the brightest be a part of the society, because we want it to thrive and exist into, the next generation and the next. But it's really you get what you give type of thing. There's, I don't know, I don't really have a fancy shiny button to lure you in with. You know what I'm saying? It's a dues paying society. You pay dues every year. You have access to things, and it's all networking. And if you don't do anything all year with your you joining, that's kind of on you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, I get it. I have actually paid for events to go to, because I'm not, I'm obviously not a member. So I've been to a couple of the holiday parties they've had, before the pandemic.
Yeah.
And
And I'm sure they were well worth it for you too.
Oh my God, just and I've gotten to meet a few people before. Like I used to work in puppetry,
Mm.
and a friend and the guy who taught me puppetry was family friends with Bunny Host. And so like I got to meet her. He's
Mhm.
like, as a thank you for everything you've done, I set up a meeting. I got to meet her. I got to talk to her. And then I saw her at a Christmas party, like, I don't know, whatever, 5, 10 years later or whatever it was. And I just had to remind her about my friend. And she remembered like
Yeah.
everything
Mhm.
about like the conversation and all this stuff.
Mhm.
And,
Mhm.
she was a great, you know, great person. I've met her a handful of times. I had a friend who passed away who was the New Jersey chapter.
Mhm.
Uh, guy. His name was Dan Necrosis. I don't know if you knew Dan,
Mhm.
um, but Dan was one of those guys. He was like, well, if we're friends, you're going to be friends with all my friends.
Yeah.
So he would just be like, listen, you're going to love it. Just come along.
Just come on. All right, let's go.
And I've been to a couple of just events,
Yeah.
and one being a annual barbecue with some guys, and I don't want to shout out names, or I don't want to like name drop, but it was a really nice time. I got to meet a bunch of people, and some of them I've stayed in contact with,
Mhm.
and it was a fun experience. But it's just great that I've over the years have gotten to meet people that like I've been reading, and that have again, like inspired. Like you said, you consider yourself like a student, and all this, and I've always considered myself a student.
Mhm.
Every artist I've ever read is my teacher. I was just talking actually on Sunday, for Easter. I was at my in-laws, and my mother-in-law asked me a question, and I was looking at, because I was looking at a book on a John Buscema book,
Mhm.
and she asked me who he was. She obviously doesn't know comics, and I said, I consider him one of my greatest teachers, because I've read cover to cover at least 10 times How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way.
Right.
And I'm like, this guy, since I got that book when I was 13 years old, has been my teacher.
Mhm.
And I occasionally go back and read it. I have tons. I used to collect cartooning books, and
Yeah, one of my favorite books, and I don't think we're prepared for this conversation. Is one of my favorite books, and I know it's almost kind of like in every cartoonist bookshelf, is How to Draw Comics in Marvel Way.
yeah,
But my mother, when I was 12 years old, gave me this book that was way too advanced for me. It was called, uh, I think it's called The Secrets of Professional Cartooning by Ken Muse. I don't know if you
I think I have that book.
ever.
Um, hold
My
on, that one I could reach.
Yeah, go yeah, grab that. It's
It
so good.
That is one of my all-time
Yeah,
favorites.
and it was really hard to come by.
Yeah, I got this on eBay like, I don't know, over 10 years ago maybe.
Mhm.
But yes,
Yes.
dude, this
Oh
book
my goodness.
changed my life.
That's a
All right.
That's the Bible right there.
This might be, yeah. My first cartooning book was How to Draw, no, not How to Draw, was Cartooning the Head and Figure by Jack Ham.
Yeah.
That was my first one. I got that back in, when I was like 9 or 10 years old at they had the Cartoon Museum in Port Chester, New York.
Mhm.
And, I grew up in a town called Mayapack, New York, which maybe is about a 45-minute to an hour drive
Mhm.
to Port. And my parents decided to take me there. And it was the first time they had a Bob Kane exhibit. I remember this. It was all Batman. Um, I got, oh my God, I usually keep photos like right around here. I don't know, it's my glasses. See if I can grab it. Are they up there? No.
Don't
Um,
don't pull all this stuff down.
no, 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 no. It's okay.
Yeah.
But like they had a giant like paper mache Superman, like he was ripping his shirt open. They had a Dennis the Menace like at the bottom of the stairs. It was the first time I saw comics drawn as large as they could go. And since we're
Mhm.
going back with Bob Kane into the 30s and 40s, they were even bigger,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
Versions were crazy big. Yeah.
And I sat there and read what was the book, The Great Comic Book Superheroes.
Mm-hmm.
And my God, like, it was the first time I read Origins of of it, and I was like, this is amazing. I love this place. I never got a chance to go back before it closed,
Mm-hmm.
but it is one of my happiest childhood memories because not only did I get my first drawing, like cartooning book, but I got to see everything I loved. It was just the greatest experience, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and I think that those kind of touch points mean so much to us, and that's why it always kind of shocks me. I'm not trying to be a fuddy duddy, but it just kind of shocks me when like people don't know stuff. Like, not how can you not know
Yeah.
that? Because that's the worst answer you could say to somebody when they say they don't know. How do you know? You don't. How do you not know that?
Yeah.
But but like that Secrets of Professional Cartooning book broke it all down. Like, this is how you blow up a strip to, like, at size and twice size, and this is how Zipatone works, and this is a photostat machine, and a lot of the stuff was like way over my head for when I was 11, 12 years old. But I knew that there was mechanics to being a cartoonist. It wasn't just drawing a goofy, buck
Yeah.
tooth face.
Yeah.
Like, this is like kind of like the professionalism of it. So that really kind of set me on the path to do this for a career.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, it is a great book. My first thing that really got me making comic strips. I don't know if you remember. I don't know our age difference or if we're the same age or whatever.
I think we're kind of close.
Yeah, I'm 49, but there was um, again, 13 years old. My Christmas gift was the Bruce Blitz How to Make Comic Strips,
The kit.
uh, the kit. Yeah, and that was the first, like, I saw, okay, you have to panel out, you have gutter space. This is how big your gut. And I was like, oh my God, I had that thing memorized. And if I play, because I have the DVD, so if I put the DVD in and I play it, everything comes back to me.
That's wild. Yeah.
And but yeah, that was it for me. And I was taking lessons from this guy in another, a few towns over from me,
Mhm.
and he was a, just an artist all around, but he worked in comics when he was younger, and he was like, okay, this is how you use a dip pen. So like at like 12, 13 years old, I started
Yeah.
learning. I couldn't get the hang of the brush at that age, but he
Mhm.
got me into pen nibs and collecting and geeking out over pen nibs that, like, nothing my friends understood.
Right. Right.
you
Yeah.
know,
And it's
but
almost its own kind of like sub language. You know what I mean? Like, there's
mhm,
even just talking about like Ames lettering guides,
yeah,
and how to use one of those, and all the different pens and stuff. And now that we're kind of getting so far ahead where people are going, I talk to a lot of young people all the time, and they're like, I draw an iPad. Like, they don't draw on paper
yeah,
at all. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like, I wanted to draw. My mother got me an iPad. You know what I'm saying? So,
I know,
I think on top of being students, we also kind of have to be kind of like the librarians too, in
yeah.
making sure that people know, like, this is how this stuff happened. And I think we got to call back to the fundamentals of the stuff for it to
No,
keep going.
I completely agree. I taught college for years, like
Hmm.
full time, and one of my classes was a traditional drawing class, and my students were like, I can only draw digitally. I go, well, not in this class. It's you have to you have to
Yeah,
know how to do it.
yeah,
And I draw digitally when I need to, but I've been doing it for so long. I actually made my New Year's resolution to stay off screens as much as possible.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I just bought. I don't know if you watched my reel on Instagram today, but I just bought a new tabletop board, and I got the Dick Blick one because I like to draw kind of almost sitting
But
up a little
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And it had one of the best. It wasn't a perfect right angle, which I don't want, but it's like a 60, I think it said, or 60 degree or 80 degree was the
Mhm,
highest it goes. And I'm
mhm.
like, I'm looking at it right now next to me, and I'm like, I played with it today. I'm like, this is amazing. This just feels good.
It feels right. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So, I can't wait to start doing some actual work on it, and start using it. And since it's nice and tabletop and portable, I can bring it in my dining room if I want and watch TV with my wife
Hmm.
while she's in the living room there. So it works. It works well. It works.
What one interesting thing about this, and again, I don't want to be too stuffy,
Yeah.
but
No.
with things kind of again, just kind of like evolving the way they're going. There were so many kind of like I don't know milestones or
Mhm.
kind of like mile markers when I was young about what made you closer to being a professional cartoonist, and one was having a drafting table.
Yeah.
And I remember when I got my first drafting table, it was a big deal. My mother made a big commitment to get the stupid table that slanted and had a little lamp on it. And, I sat at that thing almost like it was my job. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And, now with the iPad, I sound like I'm yelling at clouds,
Yeah.
but now it's kind of like, who needs a drafting table? Or who
I
has
know.
the space? Or
Yeah.
who needs to do that? I don't know. I'll never get rid of my drafting table.
I I I have. I mean, mine's sitting on my drafting table, which I lay flat because I always used it as a desk and to
Right, right.
keep my pens, and it's mostly organizational stuff.
Hmm.
So I put that on top of it, and now I have my slanted table again. But I remember, just like you, getting my first table, and I never left it. It
Hmm.
was like I remember talking to someone a couple of years ago, and they were asking me what was my favorite toy growing up, and I said pencil and paper.
Yeah.
Like I was like, that's where my imagination
Hmm.
took me, and even with that, like I had action figures, of course, but I used to draw my figures and cut them out and build sets and do all these things and
Yeah.
act. And it was through my drawings that I played, and not with actual physical
Hmm.
toys as much.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that's always going to be paramount to me. Shout out to George Gant. You got a lot.
Yeah.
Got a. It's lousy with cartoonists in the chat tonight. I love it. You talk about pro cartoons like these guys are big
Yeah.
shots. It's great to see that every 5 minutes people are crowing about the death of comic strips, but just your chat kind of fights against that.
Yeah.
Syndicated strip artists right here.
Yeah.
I love it.
Definitely, definitely. You got to, and you guys, throw your social media in so people can follow you. See where they can see your comics and stuff. It's You guys do great, great work, and I love looking at it. So, uh, yeah, share it with the audience. Um, wow, we've been talking a lot about stuff, but just since we're on the topic,
Yeah.
are you more digital these days? You still work traditionally? How do you work?
Well, yeah, I'll say unfortunately just because it kind of bugs me. Like I it took me I've been drawing digitally kind of almost like a half like a Arnold Palmer of
Yeah,
cartooning. I've done a lot of traditional, a lot of digital, and I usually like to keep this 50-50 mix.
yeah,
But since I've been working really heavy on the Scholastic books, it's all digital. Um, I, that's almost true. When I'm doing my layouts and my thumbs, and I'm like doing the thumbs for the entire book, I kind of call them a visual script. That's all on paper, and then I
okay,
scan that all in, and then I kind of like blow up
yeah, yeah,
but all the finishes are digital these days, and I miss having to stack. There's nothing. Again, these cartoonist tenants having a giant stack of illustration board with finished work on it is so satisfying. You know?
yeah. My closet has a lot of that.
Hmm.
So, um, George says Muddy Waters 2, the graphic. Oh, cool.
Yeah, yeah. George is busy.
Yeah, good stuff. We'll get you on the show some point and talk about all that too. Yeah. Same thing with D, man. I told him, he said he's waiting for the invite. Well, the invite is coming.
No pressure, Michael.
No, don't worry. I love having strip artists on because, like you said, people don't realize. And I was talking about, I don't even know where I put it now, but the kid in the comic newspaper
Mm.
here. First of all, I'm thrilled to be part of this. Was a highlight, to see my stuff in print in a newspaper. Um, but I'm reaching out to a lot of the artists on here because this is all strip work,
Mm-hmm.
and they're all indie guys, and I'm like, this is really cool. We gotta talk about these things.
That's
So
super cool. Yeah.
you know, so
And
but
I,
yeah,
I still love physical media.
yeah,
I've been paying a lot of attention lately to, and this isn't really cartooning related, but kind of how everything's starting to like slide back again. How people are now running to the thrift store to rebuy the CDs they donated.
yeah,
Because people are just bored with streaming services or things. Where they are now, they're not. I really wish I had the CD that I got rid of or I ripped to put on my iPod that
yeah,
died 2 years later. And
exactly.
and I love books. I love physical comic books.
Yeah.
I love the smell of newsprint. All
Mm.
those things are so important, and I'm kind of glad to see that people want to keep going back to
Yeah, no, I love it, and
it.
I'm right there with you. If I had the room, I'd be buying DVD. Like, I love the idea of collecting DVDs, having the bonus features, the little books that came with it, being
Yeah.
able, like, you watch a movie and you're looking at the box or
Hmm.
something. Like, I was when I went to my in-laws on Sunday, we passed a Best Buy, and I'm like, man, I just really miss. I used to treat myself every paycheck to a new DVD. You
New
know, and
new Media Tuesday,
yeah,
right there.
exactly, exactly. And I was like, man, I miss going, and they had this giant rows and rows of DVDs, and now it's nothing.
Have you been in a Best Buy lately? It's the most depressing
It,
thing.
yeah, I was in there a few months ago,
Yo, I'm
and
totally showing every one of these gray hairs. I So listen to this, Michael. This is great. This is kind of like maybe at the end of the pandemic, maybe I don't know,
Mhm.
2021 or something like that. And like how people started doing these modifications to their lives. It was like, well, I guess we're going to turn the closet into a studio, or I guess the mud room's going to be my office now. People were
Yeah,
doing all that kind of stuff. I was like, what, I miss going to the movies. Maybe I'll get a projector and show things in the backyard or something like that.
yeah, yeah,
So I had this bright idea that I'm just going to bop over to Best Buy and get me a digital projector for the backyard. Man, I went in there like the legit like a tumbleweed. When I walked in, I'm like, yo, like, I did the echo. I was yodeling in there. It's this cavernous, empty, depressing space. They had Legos
yeah,
in there. It's just like three televisions. So anyway, from that, I just I was like, I guess I got to do it online. But yes,
yeah,
things have changed.
yeah. That's why Amazon is huge. I mean, honestly, I Amazon's like a daily, website for me to be on.
Mhm.
Uh, I shop for art supplies at Dick Blick mostly.
Shout out to Dick Blick.
Yeah, and I have, unfortunately for me, I have one. Where I am in New York, I'm a half hour from one in Long Island, so I have to go over a bridge and pay a toll, or I'm a half hour from one in New Jersey, and I have to go over a bridge and pay a toll.
Hmm.
So, or if I go into the city, there's still a toll, but not as much as the bridges.
Yeah,
But it's just, and then you pay for parking, but it's
yeah,
just one of those things, like, to get there. So I'm always online on Dick Blick looking at stuff, and then I go compare on Amazon. Really,
mhm,
that's really what I do, and I'd rather have Dick Blick take my money,
right.
but.
Have you? What other sites have you gone to? Do you know about Jerry's Artorama?
I've used Jerry's Artarama, but there
They're
there was
starting to they're starting to creep up. Is that right?
yeah, but there was one. There's actually a physical location. I don't know if it's still there, but in Long Island, where
Oh wow.
when I used to live near there,
Hmm.
and when I went in, I don't know who it was, because this was years ago. This is before I even met my wife, and God, we're gonna be married, what, 17, know each other 20 years now. But so we're going back like a long time. Somebody was really rude to me in that store when I asked them about some kind of paint. I was taking a class, and I'm like, listen, I don't paint in this normally. And it was almost like, when you talk to those artists who kind of have an eliteness to them, like, oh, you don't know about this. Like,
Right.
yeah, like, okay, well, you just lost my, 30, $50, whatever. So I haven't ordered really from them because of that experience, but it doesn't mean I wouldn't if I see something I really want. I've been on their site. I've ordered from Jet Pens.
Oh, jet pens is a problem.
Oh my god!
Yo, I don't even like talking about jet pens because I've like hooked some people on jet pens. They're like, bro, why did you tell me about this site? This is bad.
Yeah. Jet pens, like my wife does. She, when we first met, and sometimes she still falls into this thing. She doesn't understand how much I love pens. There was there was this time, and this was, going back within the last maybe 4 or 5 months. I had to take her to the ER. She's okay, everything was fine, but the nurse was writing with this really, really awesome pen. And when she came in to say, I'm leaving for the night, I'm like, wait, before you leave, can you tell me what pen you got there? And I took a photo with it with my phone. Just to be like, I love how smooth the ink's coming out. And she looked at me like, your wife's in the ER.
Like, what's wrong? Yeah. Right.
I was like,
yeah.
But she was friendly enough. She, my wife's like, he has a thing for pens.
Yeah, those are maybe one of the compulsions I've kind of gotten away from over the years was supply hoarding. And supply hoarding, to get to a point like we've all, heard the stories about finding something you really loved and then going back to buy more and they're gone. So you kind of get taught to, like, if you see it, buy as much of it as you can. And after a while, it's like, I know I went through that with like the blue cola race drought of 2022 or something like that.
Yeah.
I think was a Faber-Castell, whoever owns Cola Race now, stopped making. They said they were going to stop making the Cola Race pencils, and everybody started trying to snatch them all up. But it's just kind of like, what am I going to do with 3 drawers of blue Cola Race pencils?
Well, I mean, was it in the 90s or late 2000s when Design went out and Prismacolor bought them, and everyone wanted that Design marker?
Yeah,
the black. Yeah. Well, that's not why I wanted it, but it was one of those. But yeah, it was. And then you find out that like years later that you got to order from Canada to get the Dixon. One, it's the closest thing to that pen.
Yeah, that's real. But I think like things are just changing. Even how like right now, where people feel like Copic is supposed to be like the thing, and I feel like somebody kind of got snowed because Copics are cool. I don't think they're the most amazing things ever, but they're a really nice marker. But again, we're now in a space where if somebody says, I use this, then everybody thinks that's the only thing you can do.
Let me show you this here. I just cleared my drawing table. I only kept my grays out. Copics. Okay, and touch in here. There's some touch markers too.
Yeah.
But all the majority of these Copics, I will tell you, were free.
I like it.
Because I taught, and the school buys supplies, and they're like, oh, you're teaching this class again? Here's a new set of supplies. So I got a lot. But I actually preferred touch, when I was using them over Copic.
Over Copics.
And then what's the brand now that everyone
is it the Olus?
Yeah, the Ohus. Yeah, I decided to buy them because I'm like, I need a set of grays, a good set of grays. Let me try them. Everyone's talking about them. And then I bought a skin tone one, so it's all different skin tones. And now I'm like, with my New Year's resolution, my thing also is I'm colorblind. I hate working in color. I'm just going to stick to grayscale. And if I need to color something, I could do it.
Right.
Because I understand color theory and I could read what colors things are.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I don't want to work in color anymore.
Yeah. Man, you got me with that. One thing that I was doing, this is a while ago, I didn't do my whole entire lore dump, but for a long time, I don't know if you've heard of Draw magazine.
Yes.
Yeah,
I have a bunch.
Yeah, so Draw was edited by my buddy Mike Manley, and I was associated with the magazine. Also, I was the second crusty critic.
Oh, okay.
The first crusty critic was Andy Parks, and then Andy decided that he didn't want to do that anymore, and then I jumped in. Okay. So, I had a column on, getting really good art supplies that aren't going to make you miss your deadline. and I did a Prismacolor versus Copic battle. I did all that stuff. What's the best whiteout pen? And sometimes the best stuff isn't the name brand thing.
Yeah.
So I did whole episodes. Whole issues just on that. It's important.
I'm sure I read them. I'm gonna have to go back.
You probably did. So, and that's kind of how my podcast with Mike started.
Oh, really? Yeah. I first of all, by the way, I love that show. And let's just talk about. Can you talk a little bit about the show?
Sure. And sorry, it's getting later, so I think my con crud versus allergies is starting to
Listen, if you want to end earlier,
no, we're good. I just cough it a lot. That's all.
Yeah, no. Listen, it's okay. Better in my ear than on me. So it's.
Yeah, let's not do that. So what Michael was referring to is that I have kind of this thing I lovingly refer to as the JNN, the Jamar Nicholas Network. So I kind of do a lot of things, and one of those things is podcasting. And I have a live cast that comes on every Wednesday at 8 p.m. called Pencil to Pencil, TO, not the number 2. And it's basically, like I said, a sister project from Draw magazine. Since Tomorrow's and Mike stopped producing the print magazine, all of the stuff that we were doing in this magazine for almost 10 something years, we just kind of turned it into a modern thing where we're doing video interviews and we go live and we have expert conversations about the business, about drawing supplies. We do interviews, and it's always been Mike and myself, and our third host, the first third host was Brett Blevins.
Okay.
And if you guys don't know who Brett is a magnificent comic artist from the olden times. I call Mike and Brett and all my buddies who are from that era of Marvel and DC, I call them bullpen guys.
Bullpen.
You know what I mean? They were from that era of you go to New York with, and Denny O'Neil give you a job, and you go home and draw something and bring it back on Monday, that era of comics. And then it just got a little too busy for Brett, and he stepped down. And Steve Conley is our newest third co-host. And Steve is great. He's a pioneer of web comics. He was doing motion comics back before people knew what motion comics were. And he's a fantastic balance to the show.
That's great. Yeah, I gotta say, first of all, Steve's been on the show on Get in Tune. I think I had him on twice. I was a huge. I don't want to say I was. I still am, and I just, I don't know if he's still doing his middle-age strip.
Every week.
I haven't read it in a while. It's one of those strips I kind of fell off online. But you're right, it's the web comic, and that's actually something I was going to bring up when you were talking about kind of the new era of cartoonists. Everyone's looking at the web, and and that's the digital drawing. That's what it makes easy for Webtoon, whatever they're using and stuff. But yeah, it's. I mean, the stuff that guy does, and the way, like, again, I'm colorblind, but I could see how much work he puts into the colors.
Yeah, I mean, Steve's a monster in a good way.
Yeah,
And he's so precise and he's so smart. I feel like I'm trying to like set him up on a date or something. Like, you need to meet my friend Steve. He's great. But he's a very humble guy, and he'll never
yeah,
kind of talk about himself in this way. But he's whip smart, and he's one of the like most balanced people I know, and he knows the business. So one
yeah,
of the log lines I say every week on the show is that you get to hang out with three expert cartoonists and talk about the business. And one of the things that you know uh, is great about the internet is that everybody has a voice. That's
yeah,
fantastic. Sometimes it's not so great when some of those voices don't know what they're talking about. You know what I mean? And people take that for gospel. So if I can push our spotlights ahead, because another thing, Michael, this is interesting. I was
mhm,
having this long conversation about Stan Lee. I was talking to some muggles the other day, about the average person out in the world doesn't know anything about comics or comic strips or whatever. They know Garfield and they know who Stan Lee is.
yeah,
You know what I mean? So they're like, "Oh, Stan Lee, he created comic books." Like, it starts to get just shaved
yeah,
down to it's like this very shiny lie. You know what
mhm,
I mean? It's just like, "Oh, so this guy invented comic book. He writes all the comic books." I'm not going to get it. I'm not going to get into that. But one thing that I will say about Stan, and rest of soul, I never got to meet him, is that Stan's personality allowed him to be in the front of a lot of things, and he
yes,
didn't shy away from it. I think that's something that a lot of cartoonists wouldn't want to wear. You know
yeah,
what I mean? It's very rare for you to see a cartoonist to stand up and put on a loud jacket and
yeah,
pronounce themselves to be something.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I feel like this is the era where you can't just be a cartoonist hunched in your room and draw your little things. Like, you need to have a presence. People need to hear your voice.
yeah.
They need to see your face. What are you doing this week? And that's another step of the modern cartoonist. You need to be 4 dimensional almost.
No, you're 100% right. A lot of people that have specifically have web comics
Mhm.
have some kind of YouTube or Twitch presence,
Yeah.
um, and I see that quite often. I'm actually a very shy person
Sure.
in you know nature, wherever you want to. If
Yeah.
someone starts talking to me, I'm not going to be rude.
Right.
I'm actually quite social. It's one of those, like, I'm an introvert, but I'm not. Um, I don't know, I'm not a jerk, if you will, or I'm an extrovert introvert, meaning, like,
Yeah.
if I'm
Yeah.
out, I'm social, I could do it, but I'd rather, kind of stay in my studio
Mhm.
here, not be
Mhm.
out,
Mhm.
not interact in a way. And it's not because, and I joke, I say I hate people. I don't hate people. It's I just want I like being alone. I like being in my head. I like being in my studio, being able to tell my stories and draw
Mhm.
and play in these worlds.
Mhm.
It's my sketch pad comes everywhere with me. It's just the way it is. But I live in my head, so I'm very quiet when I go places
Mhm.
until I don't start the conversation until someone starts it with me.
Mhm.
Um, and by the way, I want to say hi to Christian at with Fugitive Poems. Uh, he's in the audience. And by the way, go on if you're into mature comics. Go check out on Kickstarter Blood Valkyrie in Vegas. I backed it today. It's interesting. I won't go into it here. Just go and check it out. But I did back it. It looks great. And but yeah, like, that's the person, and he has his artist. I told him, I'm like, I want to talk to artists. He goes, no, he's very much like you. He doesn't want the attention. You know, and I am and I'm the same way, but I'm happy to do this show because I get to talk to artists,
Hmm.
and this is my like online presence. I
Hmm.
get to talk, and I get to talk about the things I love. Like, um, if I, it's easier if I just rotate, but all that artwork, I don't put any of my artwork on the board, on my
Hmm.
wall.
Yeah.
The majority of that artwork is from friends of mine who are indie comic artists,
Hmm.
because number one, it's about promoting indie comics in my show, but number two, I love this stuff. This is what
Hmm.
I'd rather look at. That's what inspires me,
Yeah.
you know. Um, so sorry, but that's the thing. Like there is nothing of mine hanging on any of these walls.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
You
I know that. That is interesting. I know that I've been in people's studios who have their best and brightest on their wall. Then I have some. I know people who would never put their own work up.
Yeah,
You know,
I hate my
it's
work when
interesting.
I'm done with it.
It's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I can pull out my wisdom book and show you every single strip and show you every mistake that nobody sees but me. You know,
Yeah.
that's just
Hmm.
that's
Uh,
just how it is.
but I want to kind of like put a cherry on top of
Yeah,
the
yeah,
what we were just talking about that I think may be like super important. And I'm glad. And even on the show, sometimes we'll have episodes where we just kind of answer questions from the chat, or we'll have viewer mail or something like that.
mhm,
And sometimes it comes up. It's like, hey, I'm not the best. I'm not the best human. Like,
mhm.
how am I supposed to get my work out there? I don't really want. I'm not a big crowd person. I don't want to go to BarCon at the end of the comic book convention day. How am I supposed to network? Because all you guys talk about is networking. And you have already just explained a really smart idea and keeping your face out there, but you do it under your terms.
Mhm.
And I would never tell somebody to do something they're uncomfortable with, but you still have to do it. So you figure out how to make that work for you, and it's a perfect example. Um, but and just to kind of wrap this up, I don't know. I kind of fight against the idea that cartoonists are supposed to be read and not seen. You know what I mean? So especially when everything's under attack, people's artwork gets stolen all the time. They have no idea who does anything. I've said for a long time we live in a right click save as world, right? It's just like, oh, I just stole this, it's mine now.
Yeah,
And a lot of people don't even have the iota of an idea who made things. So, as long as I'm around, I'm going to make sure you know who I am and
yeah,
what I do and how I do it. So, and I don't think I need to be pompous to say something like that. I want to push
yeah,
against the idea of, you have to sing for your supper, Michael.
yeah.
You
No,
know
no,
what I mean?
I get it,
But that's just.
just going on on the stealing thing. I actually, it's funny. I used to do shows when I first started doing shows. Um, Everybody always talked about how much they loved my work, but no one ever wanted to buy it. It
Mm-hmm.
took me a while to get like
Hmm.
first sales, and actually by the early 2000s, I could do a show and you know actually do very well. That I was like, okay, this is really good money
Hmm.
coming in.
Hmm.
But I used to have to put on my table signs saying no photographs because people would come up and just take photos of my work constantly, and I'd have to explain how it was theft. Because they're like, "Oh, I just like your work. I don't want to pay for it." Well, what are you going to do? You're going to go home and print it out and put it on your wall or something, or in a
Hmm.
in a book or something. I go, no, you can give me a $5 for a cheap print, and you can
Right.
get, or something. And it was,
Right. It's weird, right? Uh,
yeah,
and there's all types of weirdos at shows, and it's great that you have rules like that. People
yeah,
will do the scan by. I was doing that while you're saying.
yeah, yeah.
Somebody will walk by with their own little camera and and I
Mhm.
say, "Can I ask what you're doing?"
Yeah,
Oh, I'm just documenting. And that seems jerky to somebody.
yeah,
But it's just like, no, it doesn't work like that. there's a million con things that.
Oh my God, yeah, I could. The things like when I saw things like that happen and they come, my hand just goes automatically. Like I start leaning over. Hey, hi, how you doing? And it
Yeah,
just starts covering work.
right,
You
right.
know, it's just you gotta learn how to deal with that.
And that also kind of, we're already kind of uh, dealing with people commodifying what we do. And
Mhm.
but then if you are so brazen to go up to somebody's table at a convention and not even address the artist, but just take snapshots of your work and leave, you know, that shows that you probably didn't have it all there to begin with.
Yeah, yeah. George says I sneak QR codes in my display, so at the very least I might get a click.
That's ridiculous. Not George, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, no, I know. It's. Listen, I don't want to go into a giant convention because I have a lot of good things to say about cons and I have a lot of negative things to say about cons. But I honestly feel since like the movies became popular, like all these
Mhm.
superhero movies,
Yeah.
I feel most of the time where I can kind of relate conventions to zoos now, and we're the exhibits. Because it's like I see families, husbands and wives pushing carriages and things, and they'll have like a Superman shirt on and be like, "Oh, you're a Superman fan?" And he's like, "Oh no, my wife just got me." Like they don't know about it, or I talk to them. I'll see whatever, and I'll make a comment, and they know nothing about comics. They know no, and so I'm like, in my head, what are you doing here? You know, like again, I'm not rude about it, but
Uh,
that's the thing. So I
right.
almost feel like we're the new exhibits in the zoo, and because it's not always, depending on the show, it's not like super expensive to get in. It's something to do on a weekend with a family.
I have a thing. I just to add to that. I
Mm,
also think, I said this not too long ago. I feel like with the prevalence of these shows and that every weekend there's a comic book show somewhere,
yeah,
that's fantastic to a point. I think it kind of starts to the specialness starts to erode from it.
yeah,
And like you said, it's almost like a destination thing. Hey, let's go down to the thing. I don't know, comics. I don't know. I don't know what it
yeah,
is.
yeah,
So it's almost like walking through a flea market. I think nine
no,
times out of 10, you don't expect the person that is going back to your people stealing
mhm,
images of your work. I would believe that most of those people don't know that you're the artist.
yeah,
You know what I mean? I think, how often I said this, you wouldn't go to a store and Ralph Lauren's not selling you his shirt. You know what
yeah,
I mean? So, like,
yeah,
okay, you must be the guy who is selling this thing. How much for a pound? You know what I
yeah, yeah,
mean? Like, they don't
exactly.
think that you actually made the cheese.
Yeah,
So I think with that kind of disconnect, and that again, us being shy or not wanting to like rock the boat, we don't tell them who we are.
yeah,
You know what I mean? So it starts to just become a disconnection. So I even think that maybe with your signage, I'm not saying to you, but just
mhm,
as these conventions become more visual and everybody has a pop up banner behind them, what I've learned from Book World is maybe it's not such a bad thing to have your photo on your banner. Besides, like, hi, I'm this and I drew that. It's like,
yeah.
this is me. You're looking at me and I'm right here in front of you and make that connection. And I think that might start to change the respect a little bit.
That's interesting.
I don't think people know who they're talking to.
Yeah, who reminds me of that who does that perfect.
Hmm.
Sean von Gorman. You know him?
Yeah, I know, Sean. He's got
Every time,
pictures of himself, of himself, of
yeah,
himself, of himself.
exactly. Every social media post he has, he's like holding a stand up of him or what.
Yeah, it's like Gorman Inception. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. He
yeah, yeah.
cracks me up.
But it works. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Like that sounds really silly, but what he does works. The pedestrian is dope. You know what I mean? He knows what he's doing.
yeah,
And you just do things just a little off kilter to make people like stop and look twice at it.
yeah,
Smart.
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely. You know, that's one of the things. Like when I walk around shows, I see what people are doing, and I ask the artists, or how why you doing that, whatever. I always
Right.
try to get new ideas because, like, it took me a long time to understand height is always good at a convention, not laying stuff just flat on your table,
Yeah, vertical.
um, and so yeah, you need that's the best thing. And once I
Mhm.
realized that, I was like, okay, every show I do now is how do I design my table with what I'm bringing to have height now
Yeah.
outside of my banner behind me.
Yeah,
You know,
I think like table height, like having things with different kind of like I don't know, you know, against your horizon line, different things.
yeah,
Your your banner and even the front, like if you have something on the bottom of your table that is on the runner, all that stuff is important.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow. It's just that. No, listen, man. There's a
Yeah,
lot. There's
so it's so
a
much.
lot. You know what? I didn't ask you a question I usually ask in the beginning, and I'm really curious about this.
Hmm,
Um, but who are some of like your comic influences? Do you have comic heroes?
hmm.
Anything like who did you read growing up? Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, because of my kind of closeness to newspaper strips, a lot of my early influences are strip guys. It's a little famously known that I'm a big Gary Trudeau fan.
okay,
I love Doonesbury.
yeah,
I don't think you see Doonesbury in my work, and I also think that's another funny thing is like when you talk about influences, I think people try to make connections,
yeah,
and they're like, oh, I don't really see Burt Breathitt in your work, but okay. Um, but yeah, Breathitt probably is the closest thing because it took me years to stop drawing sneaker shoelaces just like scribbles. Like that's very Breathitt and just how loose and kinetic his stuff was.
mm,
And also, I think you know what I think Breathitt really kind of informed my cartooning for a long time. It just he did not like rulers. You know what I mean? I'm not using a straight edge. This is a corner, and Bill the Cat is in the corner, and I'm done. You know what I mean? I love kind of like not, kind of paying attention to things that didn't matter to him. Probably from comics, because I didn't grow up reading comics. See,
yeah.
I'm reading the chat. You got
No,
people,
I looked at the chat.
people making jokes.
Yeah,
um, Probably Eric Larson is probably my biggest influence.
really.
Yeah,
Interesting.
and I've met Eric a million times, and we
Mhm.
had him on the show, and that was probably like a big banner thing for me. Not necessarily that we had him on the show, is that you know just kind of to be in the same conversations with these people is very. It's
Yeah,
always a little eye opening to me. Um, and you can see you can see bits of Larson in my storytelling, the way I do a lot of my layouts, and even there's some Kirby hands, like even on the cover of one of the Leon books. He's got some really big, kind of savage dragon hands, and
yeah,
you know, uh, which go the way of Kirby. So I have a lot of little things that I like to tick off to some of those guys. Um, and I'm trying to think. Also, Mike Waringo, who was a friend. I loved how just clean his work was. I've not figured out how to be that clean with my work. It's just not in my personality. Um, and also, just anybody that's just kind of doing things their way. I always love discovering new cartoonists who I never, however they approach storytelling or how they attack the page, and I go, huh, I never would have thought of that. Or
yeah.
that's wild. That always impresses me.
Let's see. What does Christian say? He says Eric Larson has done some amazing work. Really show you how you can truly take comics in every day. Yeah, I mean, I've been a fan of his myself. For I probably even before I knew who he was.
Yeah.
I'm one of those people, like sometimes I'm really bad with names, but if you just show me their work, I'm
Hmm.
like I could tell you all about them.
Hmm.
And like this is what I see, this is all the stuff. And I love let's see, say the beauty of indie comics doing things right. There was a comic. Unfortunately, I don't have comic shops by me anymore. They all kind
Hmm.
of the local ones went out of business. But when they were going out of business, I bought a couple of Eric Savage Dragon collections. You know, the black and white ones. That they had, and that's how I love to look at
Yeah.
comics. I mean, I collect like the DC Showcase Presents books, the Marvel Essentials, like all those black and
Hmm.
white. Like those are the ones I really enjoy looking at. Um, I don't know if it goes to my color blindness or if it's just because inking has always been something I dreaded. I'm much more of a penciler, so I
Hmm.
enjoy studying the lines and the color. Having the color there just or not there just makes it easier.
Hmm.
So, um, like for me, but I was going through Eric stuff like in 2023 when I wasn't drawing the Wiz, or I'm sorry, 2024 when I wasn't drawing the Wiz. I spent the year going through artists I admire and just doing studies on them. Now I'm a big fan of like Gil Kane.
Hmm.
So I'm much more of a
Yeah.
classic guy. There's I don't want to call modern artists. I don't want to say I don't like them, but like I studied Hal Foster's Prince Valiant for like a month, you
Hmm.
know, and and I'm going through all these artists and I'm seeing all this stuff. But like I took Eric's Savage Dragon book and I just went through that and you're talking about layout and that's what I was really looking at his stuff. It was very
Hmm. Hmm.
um, because the drawing, I love his art, but like you're right, things were, and then I started going through my comics and pulling out his Marvel work and
Yeah.
doing that.
Before we start talking about Larson, because I think, I remember him catching hell a little bit. Like this was like the pre-image where
Mhm.
he seemed to always be showing up after McFarlane left the book.
Yeah,
And he was like, "Oh, I love McFarlane. Who is this guy?" You know what I mean? I was like,
yeah,
Larson's dope. You know what I mean? And like I always enjoyed, I enjoyed his Amazing Spider-Man after Todd left. I enjoyed
yeah,
his Spider-Man after Todd left.
yeah.
And the Savage Dragon was great. I have a couple other influences I have to give mention to. I'm a giant Paul Grist fan.
Mhm.
If you're familiar with Paul Grist, he's a British cartoonist who did Kane, that series about a cop, and
Okay,
he's hugely inspired by Toth. Like he has
okay.
like amazing black and white stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my! You
I'm
know
gonna.
what? You might remember him because he did the Jack Staff and what else did he do? He did a couple of American things. Yeah, you look him up, you'll go,
I'm looking him up
oh,
right now because when first of all, when you mentioned Toth is like my all-time favorite. Uh, I like when I got to draw Zorro. The first thing I went and pulled out was my Toth Zorro
hmm,
collection.
hmm, hmm, hmm.
Um, I have all three of his, the Genius
Yeah.
animated, the Genius, and I got also recently I bought this for myself during Christmas. It was kind of cheap, but the artist edition of
Mm.
Bravo for Adventure.
Oh, wow.
It is one of the most gorgeous books, and like it's normally like say $100. It was down to like 60.
Get it.
I'm like yeah. I just bought it.
Just get it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so that was my thing, and but yeah, I go through those was it Genius Isolated, Genius Animated, Genius Illustrated. I pull those off my back table there
Hmm.
all the time. Um, you know, I think a lot of people will see somebody like Toth in my work when I draw simple.
Hmm.
Um, and when I draw a little more I don't want to say complicated, but more detailed character, I think people tend to see more of like Gil's work in me. Um, with a mix of maybe a few Japanese artists. Um, I don't know if you're a fan of the Japanese manga or anime, but
Yeah, I'm a huge Tezuka fan.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah, because I grew up, and I've talked about this many times. I grew up on Battle of the Planets and all these cartoons, Voltron and whatever it was. And I you know, I was drawing kind of like an anime style before it was popular.
Right.
And then when I started studying to get into college and to do all this stuff, and I said I want to draw comics,
Mm-hmm.
I started going more with the American style and studying those artists. And and then later I kind of, I guess, developed this fusion-esque style. And it's one of the reasons I left drawing the Wiz. I put the Wiz on hold because I have other story ideas to do, and one of it is kind of a giant robot style manga.
I love
And
it. I'm in.
so, yeah, so that's also what I'm working on when I'm not drawing the Wiz stuff. Let's see, what does Christian say here? um I was a huge fan of McFarlane's stand and was thrown into Larson, took over. Took me a minute, but I became big. Yeah, it's
Yeah, and I don't blame Larson for
yeah,
that, but he had to kind of like, you know, take over, so to speak. So,
yeah,
before I let this go, now that you
yeah,
brought
yeah.
this up, there's a couple of other people I'm big fans of from indie world. I don't know any cartoonist who doesn't love Jaime. So
Mm.
Jamie Hernandez, I'm a big Jamie Hewlett fan. I love
Okay,
Tank Girl.
yeah,
Um, uh, I'm a big Bob Fingerman fan.
hmm,
I love Joe Matt. Rest in peace. I have like these influences that just kind of go all over the
yeah.
place. And then my last one will be Hank Ketchum. I'm a giant Dennis the Menace.
Who doesn't love? Who
It just,
doesn't love?
it just, if you look at those single panel strips, he's doing crazy stuff with shadow and cast shadows and spot blacks, and he'll like
Yeah,
invert the whole thing. And come on,
yeah. That
he's
was
genius.
yeah. Looking at, I'll go and look at his. He's not one I did a study on recently, but years ago, he was someone I looked at a lot
Oh my
because
god.
I just. You're right. There's just so much going on, and like you don't even think because you look at it and it looks so simple. And it's almost to me it's almost like looking at Toth,
Hmm.
because Toth did all these great details and then he just erased everything
Hmm.
and said, here's what needs to be there. And that's kind of like looking at a Hank Ketchum drawing
Yeah.
too.
Even
Yeah.
with like, I have a bunch of the old like Fawcett paperbacks on
Hmm.
my shelf, but even just going through them, and if I can remember, a lot of the stuff I have, wasn't using zip. He was just creating patterns. Like,
Yeah.
Mr. Wilson would have like a tartan pattern on his jacket next to his wife, who's got these like squigglies on it, next to
Mhm.
Dennis, who's got you know what I mean? He's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
like seeing this picture
Yeah.
and interpreting it in ways that I don't think, so good. It's
I
so
know.
good.
I know. Oh, that's like I would love. I'm gonna have to look at my books now and see what Dennis the Menace
Yeah,
got.
go. Yeah, Hank Ketchum is a cartoonist masterclass. You just
Yeah.
read a couple of those Dennis books.
Yeah, it doesn't really get better. I'll say this: modern day cartoonists, one of my all-time favorites. Are you familiar with Dan Thompson?
I think if I saw his work, I would.
He Rip Haywire was one of his strips.
Oh, right, right, right,
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
right, right.
he just put out it wasn't a Kickstarter. I think it's Zoop was
Mhm.
the website. He just had something called Squid Williams on there.
That's a great name.
Yeah, oh my god, yeah. His stuff is like an updated take on classic artists
Mhm.
that, like, looking at it's fun, but you like, okay, that's kind of Chester Gould, that's kind of Hanna-Barbera, that's
Mhm,
kind of
mhm,
like, he
mhm.
has all these great illustrative backgrounds in there, and like, but he does it in his own way, and you're like, oh my god, I could see Buscema in that, I see Kirby in that, I see that.
Mhm.
He's like someone I think is just like insane
That's
uh
that's
to,
really cool.
today to look at. And I have, I think, almost all his Rip Haywire books, and I did back his Squid Williams
That's a
Zoom.
great name. That's like a "I wish I thought of it" name.
Yeah, yeah,
Squid Williams is
exactly,
great.
exactly. I actually have a character in a story, and I had a student And I told him, I'm going to use your name for a character.
Mm.
His real name was Thaddeus Neptune. I am like, that is the coolest name. Like I said, I told him you should drop out of school and learn to like play the guitar and start a band.
Yeah,
But
you gotta do something with that. Don't waste that.
yeah, yeah, that's like a famous name. So
Yeah,
I have a character. He's not based on. I just told him I'm stealing the name, and, and so.
that's fantastic.
But yeah, and hopefully in 2026 we'll see. We'll see
That's
that
cool.
character somewhere. But yeah,
That's
no,
really
the
cool.
naming. That's the thing I like about Dan's work. He's got great names for characters.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Very clever stuff. But yeah, um, my God, I don't know what else to ask you right now. There's so much you and I could be chatting about right
Yeah,
now.
before I go, we could talk a little bit more about Scholastic if you want.
Yeah, I mean, we did talk a little bit about Leon. I'd love to go into more of it. Like, that, yeah, actually, we didn't really talk about him in the detail that I wanted. So let's definitely talk about him. Can you tell me how you came up with the character and you know what not I don't want to use the word inspire, but like how did he become a character for you to tell more stories with
Hmm.
than just a one shot?
Uh, the short version is I kind of created this. You know how you keep a sketchbook, I keep a sketchbook. You're always kind of putting things in it, and you're like
Yeah.
throwing spaghetti against the wall all the time. That's what a sketchbook's for. And I drew this uh, character of a kind of like a little sidekick style superhero kid, and he was standing next to kind of like this Batmobile. And I can't remember what it says, but he said something like, "I don't know how to drive this. I'm 9." You know. So
Yeah.
I kind of was this current, and I wrote on it Leon, like I that was his name. Like I always had that, and I had this idea of which is kind of an offshoot of my first self-published comics, which was kind of like Rick and Morty before Rick and Morty existed. So it was kind of
Hmm.
like dimension hopping. Uh, that in this one universe, my character was going to find this kid who was kind of like Robin without Batman. Let's say Batman went out for a quart of milk and never came back. That kind of thing.
Hmm.
So without the grim daddy issues part attached to it, I kind of took that idea and just kind of kept picking with it over a couple of decades, which is wild. And at one point, I really started pushing on it, especially when kind of we talked a little earlier about the era of superhero movies got really hot, and you remember there was that hyper violent moment where like 300 was out, Sin City was out, Kick Ass was out.
Yeah, yeah.
Everybody was getting their teeth knocked in with hockey sticks. You know what I mean? It's like, wow, superheroes grew up. Wow, they're violent. And I started really kind of leaning more on this idea of a kid hero who wasn't solving his problems by fighting. You know what I mean? Because I think our society, and it's, you can tell me if I'm wrong, we worship superheroes, but we kind of look the other way when you think about Wolverine actually puncturing somebody's lungs with knives coming out of his hands. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I also remember this was a while ago. There was a Target commercial. It was like a back to school commercial, and this school bus pulls up, and the doors open, and all these little kid superheroes jump off. Iron Man runs off, and then Hulk has big hands. He runs off, and a little Wolverine jumps out, and they're all like posing and playing. But I'm like, but all of these heroes solve the problems with violence. So without sounding corny, that's kind of how superheroes make their bread butter. We punch things. We punch problems into being solved. So me feeling at this point in our culture where everything's so violent, and I had done some graphic novel work, dealing with violence and things like that. It's like if we're ever going to move the needle away from having such a violent society, like maybe we should stop telling kids. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
To read the Incredible Hulk comics. So, I wanted to create this kid who found other ways to solve his problems without it being corny. Because the minute that people smell that you're trying to preach to them something, they don't want it.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to make that part of his character. And that's kind of where Leon really took off. And that's even coded into the book. You can't really see it because I don't preach about it. But he makes you know nets and booby traps and grappling hooks and stuff like that. And the last thing he wants to do is fight. Because what happens when you're a kid and you fight? You get in trouble,
Yeah, very
right?
true.
It's just like, you know what I mean. That's just kind of how it works. We George says superheroes, we hurt people, and
Yeah.
it's funny when you say it out loud and you think about it. But this is kind of what we give our kids, and then you get
Mhm.
mad at them when you have to leave work to go pick them up from school because they got suspended for
Yeah, yeah.
fighting. You know what I'm saying? So there's some weird things that we're doing with our culture. So anyway, that's really kind of the genesis of Leon, and I've modified him over the years and put a lot of really put a lot of flaws into him. I made him as a near imperfect 10-year-old that I could think of that kids can relate to. And some of the best feedback I've got about the books is that, my kid hates reading, but he loves this. I don't know what magic dust you sprinkled in there, but my kid can't put this book down. When's the next one? You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I feel like I'm on the right track with the Leon books.
Yeah, no, that sounds. I mean, listen, that sounds great. I don't know. I didn't know much about the Leon books. Like I
Hmm.
said, when I did my Instagram post today, I've seen them in the
Hmm.
stores. I've
Hmm.
flipped through them, but I haven't sat down to read them. I haven't had a chance to buy them,
Hmm.
and it is something that I do want to I do want to pick up.
You should
I
check it out, and
and
I think you'll be surprised.
well, for me, I always love kid friendly stuff. My work is very kid friendly.
Hmm.
When I um, when I like I mentioned, I grew up sick in and out of hospital. So when I draw, I always feel like I'm drawing for that kid in the hospital who can't get out and they need some cheering up. They need some. So I always tend to try to add humor to my work. I mean, listen, I got ideas that aren't, you know, super kid friendly, but I do everything I do, I tend to end up changing it to make it for kids so that kids
Hmm.
can
Hmm.
enjoy it because even though I know I'm not getting it officially in the hands of 6 kids in the hospital, that's kind of who my audience is. I want to like cheer them up, get them,
Yeah,
you know the amount, because I know what it's like dealing with that.
and also, we were kids once, and when we
Yeah,
were kids, I'm sure you didn't think you were dumb, right? You had thoughts on stuff. You had your own,
yeah,
ideas about how the world worked, and
yeah, yeah. I didn't think I was, but other people told me. So
well, I just think another thing about being in traditional book publishing and um, it's still surprising to some people to find out how big middle grade graphic novels are.
yeah,
You talk about Dave Pilkey, his Dogman books do a initial print run in the millions,
yeah,
and then people go, "Oh, Dogman!" Like, yo, somebody's buying these books.
exactly.
You know what I'm saying? So that's a whole other conversation
Yeah,
about comic book fans and not kind of getting what's happening in
yeah,
book world. Um,
yeah.
but we're kind of here to tell really good stories
Mhm.
for kids, and the stuff that you may kind of not you, but the things that
Yeah,
people will write off as silly, you should probably read it. Like if you read
yeah.
Dog Man, you're gonna go, "Wow, this is smarter than I thought it was." This,
I've read a few of them.
you know,
Hold on one second. I want to just before I forget. DS, do you know how many books you've sold so far?
like with everything. I'm not exactly sure
I
what
mean,
DS
maybe
means.
with maybe just Leon in general, since you've been with Scholastic.
Yes and no. I mean, that's kind of like a very open question.
Yeah,
Like, because another big thing about this market is that there's a lot of kind of like meters and columns to it.
Yeah.
It's like there's a hardcover, it's a soft cover. Is it in the United States? Is it rest of world? Is
Mm.
it is it
Well,
overseas? Is it digital? You know what I'm
are
saying?
you international with Leon?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And,
Congrats on
and
that.
yeah, it's great. And I've done some lectures like over Zoom, like in Hong Kong, and there's
Mm,
kids like, "You like Leon," and that's crazy to me. Uh,
that's awesome.
so, but yeah, no, I'm not to wave off Dee's question, but it's a harder question to
Yeah,
answer than
I get
just
it.
say 500,000. Like I don't know,
Yeah, but it's
it's a
also
little vague than that.
like you were saying though. It is first of all, it's a big market for these middle school um, books.
Yeah.
I've worked in all levels of education,
Hmm.
and I have seen how in elementary school, usually like by second grade, Dogman's in their hands, and they are reading that up into fifth grade, and then they hit sixth grade, and all of a sudden it's books like Smile is getting into them,
Hmm.
and and they're reading it. And I will say by eighth grade they're usually starting manga, you
Hmm.
know, and that's the thing. And then they'll either continue with it throughout high school, or they may pick up like an actual comic trade and read
Hmm.
like a superhero if one of the movies um, spark an interest in them, and then
Hmm.
they find out it's completely different from the movie and they put it down.
That's a
Uh,
whole other thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's a whole. But yeah, no. But I've seen how many kids like I'd be in a sixth grade classroom, and how many kids have something like Leon, or like I said, Smile or whatever,
Hmm. Hmm.
and they're just into them.
Yeah,
They're just
it's
really
great. And kind of the way we talk about Hal Foster in like, John Byrne comics, this is what these kids are growing up on. They
yeah
love Raina. Raina's the queen of everything, and
yeah
Raina's such a sweetheart. But this is her time now, and they'll be talking about Raina Telgemeier down the road, like, oh man, remember when she did, you know what I'm saying? And
yeah
it's just as valid as, Jack Kirby stuff.
yeah.
So
So
one other thing I wanted to say about that, which is interesting, is that, and I've been in some really odd conversations with people about feeling like graphic novels are a gateway to something. It's like, oh,
mm,
well, maybe when they're finished with these graphic novels, they'll go read a real book.
mm,
You know what I'm saying? And as
yeah
lifelong comic book fans, you read comics,
yeah
and it doesn't matter what comic it is, you're reading comics. So
yeah
I'll stand up on a hill and talk about the importance of graphic novels, and you know, like it's a medium, not a genre.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And that as long as kids are reading, I'm really excited. I hope they continue it, but I don't think it.
I
You see where I'm going with
No,
that.
no, but listen, I 100% agree with you. And then I want to get to George's comment, but I want to just share this story. I was at a comic book shop doing an event one day, and and this is kind of goes to what it is, but it's also how people interpret comics. And this kid, he probably was maybe 11, 12 years old. He picked up a Smurf comic.
Smurfs
You
are
know,
dope.
I
Yeah,
got I got Papa Smurf as a poster behind me, and
Smurfs
that's
are
an
dope.
original one from like the '80s. Okay,
Hmm.
I freaking love the Smurfs. I am hugely influenced by the Franco-Belgian cartoonist Peyo's one of my all-time favorites. Um, and it's not just the Smurfs. You go to Benny Breakiron and Pussycat and all. Like
Hmm.
I'm a fan. Of that, and you can see it in my drawings. But
Do
the
you like Lucky Luke? Do you like?
Oh, Lucky Luke, Asterix, you name, uh, God, obviously Tintin, and I can go through a
Yeah,
bunch, and obvious, and what's that guy now who's popular, the one that does Black Sad,
oh, right. Yeah.
that, I
Yeah.
mean, the artwork in that, wow, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, no, but I heard the mother say, no, he's too old, he shouldn't be reading the Smurfs. And like in my head, I'm not going to go up and insult a woman, but I'm like, he's reading. Like, that's the thing. And the Smurfs, like, you don't understand. They weren't made for kids originally. You
Hmm.
read the original books, Papa Smurf is a jerk. You
Hmm.
know, it's
Oh,
like,
yeah, like the Johann and Pitwheat stuff.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, I
yeah.
love that. I remember
Mhm.
I don't even think they fully got it translated into English. I was
No.
talking with oh, what was his name who used to run Paper Cuts. Um,
Oh, right, 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 right.
um, I don't remember, but I asked him. I said, "Are you going to get any of those?" And he goes, "Yeah, we're in the works of a deal, but I don't know when they sold the company if that deal
Right.
disappeared or whatever."
Hmm.
What does he say? The Smurfs are essentials.
Yeah.
Tintin, so amazing. Yep, Hergé's master. But yeah, no, but that's the thing. Like, I'm all for kids reading,
Yeah.
or anybody just picking up a book and reading. I don't care if it's a comic, read,
Yeah.
but if you're getting a comic,
Hmm.
get what interests you. I mean, the Smurfs are kind of humorous adventure fantasy stories.
Hmm.
How do you not like that? I mean,
Yeah, like,
they
yeah, and I think us as kind of old fuddy duddies,
yeah,
I think we have to be careful that we're not gatekeeping
yeah,
ourselves.
yeah, yeah,
Like, oh, don't do this, do that. Kids
yeah.
love Chainsaw Man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like whatever. And
Listen,
you always read stuff that you shouldn't have been reading when you were a
it's
kid.
it's a good book though. I've read the first volume.
Yeah, I'm not hating. I'm just
No,
saying.
no,
It's
I
just
know,
like,
I
yeah,
know. It's
it's just there's stuff out there for
yeah,
everyone. You know what I
yeah,
mean? So,
yeah, exactly. Let's go to George's comment. He says, "Listening to your description of land sounds a lot like superheroes meet Doctor Who. I can't confirm the books are exactly like that, as my kids stole both of
yeah.
them."
You should ask your kid, George, what Leon's about.
That's great. That is great. I'm gonna, you know what I'm gonna do? I am gonna put them for now on my Amazon wish list, but I'm gonna try to wait until I'm at an actual comic shop that
I
sells them, so I can give the comic shop money. Um,
like it. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I know there's a million things to read, and I do these kind of strong infomercials all the time when I'm doing my live cast stuff. It's just that you kind of we look at what we think we like and what we think we don't like.
mhm.
Right. So I could tell you a million stories when somebody goes, "Oh, I finally picked up Leon and read it. Holy crap, this isn't what I thought it was." I don't know what you thought it was,
Yeah,
but usually one of the things is that in your mind, not you, but in your
yeah,
mind, it says it's a kid's book. So, I have to decode that. Well, what does that mean? I think a lot of people think kids storytelling is, brush your teeth, not, night, night, time to go to bed,
yeah,
count the sheep, and I don't know anybody in this graphic novel space that are telling those stories. Like, we're telling like real meaty,
yeah,
character driven stories. And I think, something's hooking these kids, and it's not that it's silly. I mean, silly's part of it, but
yeah.
that it's not simple is kind of what I was saying.
No, no,
What I was
exactly. Yeah.
thinking.
No,
So
no, yeah,
yeah,
you're
I think you'll be surprised. And
right.
yeah, there's no Doctor Who in my books.
But it's but that's the thing, and that and like you know, kids aren't dumb. So I don't write. I try not to write down to kids. I just try to write a good story.
Hmm.
And and yeah, but that's the thing. I just and that's what people don't understand. Kids aren't dumb. They're going to know if they're being talked down to. They're going to know if they're being lied to. I mean, you look at someone like Edward Gorey who scared kids in his books,
Hmm.
but they sold.
Hmm.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like,
yeah,
that was the thing. Anyway,
yeah, yeah.
we should probably start wrapping up. We did a good hour and a half. Listen, you're coming back at some point. We got more
Yeah,
to
let's
talk
let's
about.
do it. We just scratched the surface.
Yeah, yeah, and I gotta pull out those National Cartoonist Society stuff and get some photos and show them to you. And yeah, you're gonna
Mhm.
love. We can even do like a walkthrough. I'll set up my other camera over my drawing table and
Well, I like that.
flip through them.
Oh well, Michael, I have a great little plug for you.
Yeah, sure.
So like one of the things I do at the NCS because of all I guess because of all my experience doing podcasting and stuff, I do a lot of media things for the
Mhm.
NCS, and I do a bi-monthly uh, NCS open house Zoom series.
Mhm.
So every other month, and it's open to the public. You just have to
Yeah.
register. I usually do some sort of studio interview with a current NCS member, and
Yes.
we've had a million people since I started. But we have a special one, which is
Mhm.
going to be a webinar, and if you're not a dues paying NCS member, it's a $12 ticket. And on the 28th, Monday the 28th, we're doing show and tell with Sergio Aragonés.
Let me tell you, I get the emails.
Yeah,
And I missed the. I signed up for the one where you doing. Was it last month? It was the father and daughter.
yeah, it was
Luann, right? Yeah,
Greg and
yeah,
Karen Evans. Yeah,
yeah. And I got the one about Sergio, and I was going to ask you if I missed it
no, it's the
because
28th. Yeah,
Sergio's my all-time favorite cartoonist. I have
yeah.
an original Gru with the
Hmm.
minstrel up there. I
Hmm.
collect that. I actually, because one of the comic shops closed, I missed issue 4 of the Gods versus Gru, so I just looked up if the trades were finally out. So
Uh-huh.
I need to pick that. I have, if it's a Sergio, if Sergio's name's on it, I own it probably. I'm just
Well,
letting you know that right now.
well, I mean, bro, every 2 weeks when we have these Zooms, Sergio is front and center at the Zoom. He's just in
Yeah,
the chat with everybody else. And he's such a wonderful person.
yeah,
I love that he calls me Yamar. I think that's
yeah.
fantastic. But I'm hosting this show and tell. It's 2 hours, so it's 7 to 9 p.m. on Monday. Get a ticket, and I'm just
Yeah.
going to turn the camera on and say, Sergio, show us something.
Yeah, yeah.
And he's going,
I will be at that one. I punch out at 7 p.m. So I'm gonna tell my wife we're ordering dinner. You're just gonna bring it to me in the studio when it comes, and I'm
yeah,
gonna sit and watch.
it's
That
a,
is, I just haven't bought the ticket, but that is, I'm so glad I didn't miss it because I thought about it
yeah.
yesterday, and I'm like, crap, and I
Yeah.
just couldn't find the email, but I know I have it.
Yeah, don't miss it. And this is again, this is kind of like what I said about being an NCS.
Yeah,
I wanted to bring something that I am fairly good at to the community, and this is kind of this is where I'm at. I'm showing up and doing stuff. So
absolutely.
if you're interested in the NCS, you should come to this event.
Awesome. And first of all, I will, but you guys out there listening, you know, check it out.
Yeah,
But before I let you go, I have one question for you.
sure.
Who is your guest tomorrow night on Pencil to Pencil?
We don't have one.
You don't have a guest tomorrow. Okay, so it's just going to be you three chatting.
Yeah, we're doing sketch talk. So I believe that Mike, Steve Connolly, and I are going to be drawing and talking.
Awesome.
We don't do a lot of those because my host brain can only do so many things.
Mhm.
So producing the show, you know how hard this is, Mike. You're
Yeah,
looking at the chat and talking and doing,
yeah, yeah.
arms of Vishnu. You're doing the whole thing. But doing that in drawing is just like at the end of my superpower limit. But
Awesome.
we're going to do something like that tomorrow. It'll be a good time.
Awesome. I look forward to it. And since I don't have a show tomorrow night, maybe I'll be able to actually watch live uh, and participate in the comments.
Yes.
So awesome. Well, listen, it was great having you on. I thoroughly enjoyed chatting with you. You're going to have to come back. I will obviously do another Tuesday night
Yeah.
show. But yeah, this was a lot of fun. To the audience, lastly, you are, what's your social media handles they can find you at?
Sure. My website is jamarnicholas.com. The best place to find me is probably on, I don't know, like Facebook, but I don't know, you gotta friend me. Instagram is Jamar underscore Nicholas underscore cartoonist. And yeah, I guess that's about it. On
Yeah.
YouTube, yeah, follow the Pencil to Pencil channel, and that's the best place to catch up with me.
All right. And with that, guys, I will see you next week. Next week is no guest. I am doing a just a crowdfunding. So if you have something that you're backing right now that you think I should know about, message me. If you have a crowdfunder that's going on, and it'll be going on next Wednesday, message me. I will show as many as I can that I think my audience will enjoy. Um, and with that, I will see you all next week. All right.